Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heeter. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I hope this is going to be, I was going to say this is going to be a fun one. Some people might not think that this is fun, but this is actually why I'm so excited to bring you on as my guest. Welcome to the podcast, Amber. Amber Gilormo from The Boutique Lawyer is a practicing business and trademark attorney, serial entrepreneur, and a mom. And she says she knows what it's like to worry about protecting her home, savings, and most importantly, her family. So she created The Boutique Lawyer to share what she's learned through the practice of law and her experience in owning multiple businesses. And at The Boutique Lawyer, they offer DIY legal templates, guides, and other resources that are approachable and accessible to entrepreneurs of all backgrounds. Welcome to the podcast, Amber.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about all things big, bad, and scary, I suppose, for business owners.
Yeah, which I think like the whole premise here, right, is we're getting big and brave. And I
Yeah.
think so. If you have seen our YouTube channel when Amanda and I were still co-hosting, we did a video with Amber as well already. So you can learn more about her personally on YouTube for sure. So I wanted to first and foremost bring you on because I think, well, I think the world of you. That's just the truth. And first and foremost, I followed you on social media and I find you to be funny, engaging. Your content is so consumable, but it's covering topics that sound scary. I think like the two biggest things for me about that sounded really intimidating about starting a business or running a business is the finances and then the legal aspect. I don't know anything about those things. So who am I to do this if I can't do those things? And then you can say, oh, well, hire somebody, but that's expensive. And when you're starting a business, you have $0. So how do you do that? And I think first and foremost, finding your content and being able to take that in and actually feel like I'm learning stuff, but I'm also entertained and I feel like safe with you because you talk about things in a really accessible way. So number one, please go follow Amber if you're not already. Of course, that's going to be linked in the description. But then I actually bought some of your templates and they are so easy to use and so informative, and the way that you break down, hey, here's different clauses that you would put in these different places, it just makes so much sense. It's simple and it feels okay. I feel really legally protected in these aspects. So I just honestly swear by your services, and I guess I'm particularly interested to hear from you first and foremost about like how do you approach law business law in a way that's like fun and accessible and makes it feel easy. How do you do that?
So okay. When I started practicing law, I did a little bit of everything at first. I did criminal defense, family law, contracts. Then I went into defense work a little bit, and then I spent the bulk of my legal career doing personal injury. And so I was suing insurance companies and individuals for all different kinds of stuff, but mostly related to, we call it negligence or injuries to people. And so I had a lot of experience like litigating, and I started my own firm after, oh my goodness, no, I can't remember, 10 or so years practicing. I started my own firm. Going from lawyer to business owner was such a like whiplash transition. The same from like going from working in corporate to a business owner. You are like in a whole new world. And so I learned the same way everybody else does about running a business. Finances are still scary to me sometimes, especially when I get my tax bill. And just learning about the legal stuff and what's required of you as a business owner can be so challenging and overwhelming. And so I just think of it like, how can I understand this? I'm like a very practical, hands-on learner. And so I try to make all of my resources, my education, like how I approach explaining things very hands-on and explaining, like walking you through it, because that's the way I learn. And I just feel like it's easy to get overwhelmed by those like super high level difficult concepts unless you know how to do it, how to implement, how to use it in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. I think that it's interesting because you have the perspective of having been in the law space for a long time, right? Like a significant amount of experience. So I wonder for you, does legalese or the kind of nuance of legal issues, does that still intimidate you? Or do you feel like, oh no, I get it and so it's not intimidating to me anymore?
No, I mean, so I still like whenever a new law is issued, I just find that kind of language, like the legal language, whether it's a statute I'm reading, like a FTC rule I'm reading, I find it it's super boring. Let's be honest. It's so boring. It can be like very complicated to read. You read the same sentence three times to understand what it said. And yeah, I'm still the same person. So it takes me quite a while sometimes to comprehend something, although yeah, I've been doing this long, it's a little easier, right? But still, even now, I think that the law is not meant to be like business owner friendly. It's just not. Like it's written by lawyers. It's super complicated for a reason. It's like extra political. And so I think that that makes it very like unapproachable anyways. And in general, I think that the more things are broken down for entrepreneurs to be easy to use and understand and copy paste into their business, the better it is. Law should be approachable. You should be able to figure it out without having to spend 2 hours researching the difference between an LLC and a partnership. You should be able to figure it out. And it's not easy to do, right?
People
So,
are terrified to be the one to explain it because they don't want to be held legally responsible. So the
yeah.
number of times I've tried to ask people for clarifications, they're like, "Oh, I'm not the person you can ask about that. Oh, I can't talk to you about that." It's, "Oh my gosh, but it should just be a definition, LLC or partnership or whatever. That shouldn't be something people are afraid to talk about." And but I get why they are, but that it's
Yeah. And I think
complicated.
unless you've really kind of been there, done that from the legal side, a lot of lawyers are don't really talk about it very well. And whether that's because they're very transactional in nature, they just sit there drafting contracts, they don't litigate them, they don't like implement them, they don't fight over them in court. Like you have to see how that works in the real world or just really understand it very well, like through research and looking at cases and stuff to figure out like what does an LLC do for me? What does a partnership do for me? What does a corporation do for me? And you can explain these things, but explain them in a way that applies to like a modern entrepreneur. Right. I think that's the tricky part is like taking these concepts that were built for corporations and like traditional formal LLCs. How does that apply to what people are doing now today online?
That's what I think you do so well. And that's what I think, in my opinion, really sets you apart as far as making your content just so accessible and also entertaining, honestly, because you have a great sense of humor and you really lean into that. And your team, I don't know how big your team is or how many people you have working with you to make execute that vision, but it really makes something that's like a dry, scary subject very easily consumable. So
Yeah,
I'm curious
100%.
about that process, like your content creation.
Yeah, I have like an OBM and like a content person, and I have my like law firm staff. Very separate kind of worlds because my law firm is like separate from the boutique lawyer. It's like
Mhm.
a separate entity. It's a whole thing. The boutique lawyer is really a digital resources contracts for modern entrepreneurs. And my team there is small. It's like the three of us, and we are just like doing our best all the time. I work with a lot of contractors, though. It's something I've done over the last like 2 years, I think is really kind of find the people that I felt would help me move the needle because the content creation portion, I don't know how like professional content creators do it. That is so incredibly difficult. I'm not that funny all the time. You can hear me talk, I'm just not. I have a very dry sense of humor, and sometimes it doesn't translate super well. My content girly on my team helps me do that because she like keeps me approachable in the way that like I will sometimes be too dry with it, and that doesn't always translate well online. Like I can't use my real thoughts sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, and I mean maybe the answer is hire a really good team, but I'm curious, how do you take concepts that are big, scary, intimidating, dry, overwhelming, complicated, nuanced, and break them down into content that then serves as marketing and messaging, because all of us are really trying to do that, right? Whatever it is that we do, not all of it is going to be as dry as legal contracts or new laws or something like
Yeah.
that. But we all feel like, hopefully, we're experts at what we do. But then how do you talk to people who aren't experts?
I always remember that my ICA, the person I'm talking to, is a new business owner or somebody who's trying to like scale up. So it's these two very distinct people, but the majority of my audience are new business owners. And so I almost always focus on the very basics. And I think to myself first, how does that apply to what people are actually doing? And I think that's the key piece that most people miss. It's I could tell you about 30 nuances of privacy policies that you need to make sure you're doing, and the way you have to have two addresses to be in compliance with two methods of contact to be in compliance with California and Nevada law. Nobody cares about that, right? So you focus on the big picture stuff so that a person can understand 90% of what they're supposed to do. And just taking it back to the basics and figuring out how it actually applies in the real world. Like, how are people, what are their real, like, how can I help them implement this thing that they need to do, legal thing in their business in a way that's like easy. And so for me personally, I actually love templates. Like I buy Instagram templates for my content, Reels report from my friend Laura. She has this awesome like Reels membership I love. And then like I buy copywriting templates. I love things that like make it super easy for me to do like that content piece. And I thought like the same thing is true of legal, right? We need like a framework for us to be able to apply it into our business. So whether I'm creating like a reel or a carousel or a post, I always approach it like a framework. What is like one piece, one actionable thing from this piece of content that they could use? And whether that's like a mood boost, like for the day, oh, you can do the legal stuff. It's not that serious. Or it's like something more actionable or practical. Like I just focus on one specific thing.
One thing you focus on a lot is privacy policy. And you and I just briefly talked about this right before we started recording. But this is one of the biggest kind of impacts you've had on your content, at least has had on me personally, is that I used to have this saying when I started Scrappy. Like, I was very much a person, all I did when I started my business is I Googled about what do I need to do in my state to kind of register a business. And as a sole proprietor in my state, I found a resource, and I couldn't even tell you where or what or whatever. That was just basically in Arizona. And this is not legal advice, just to be totally clear. I'm not a lawyer, but also, even if I was, I wouldn't give you legal advice over a podcast. But I found some website that told me that in the state of Arizona, as a sole proprietor, you can start offering services, receive money, and use your social security number as the tax ID and file your income taxes that way. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty simple. So I guess I'll just start. And so what I
Yeah.
used to always say is that to start a business, when people tell you you need X, Y, or Z, you need this website, you need this photo shoot, you need all of these things, I would say people who are telling you you need that to start are just trying to sell you something. And I used to
Yeah.
always say, all you really need to start is a Stripe link so you can take people's credit card information. And what I learned from you is that if you're accepting anybody's like information at all, like contact information, or so if you have an email list, if you're like giving people downloads or something like that, if they're consuming your information on your website, or if they're signing up for something, if you're receiving their information in any way, there's more than just a Stripe link that you need. You need to have more than that. Making sure that those things are in order does matter. So the number one thing that I have seen you talk quite a lot about on social media is the importance of having a privacy policy and terms on your website. So I wondered if you could kind of touch on that to clarify.
Yeah, so absolutely. I sometimes I feel like I recycle the same like messaging a million times, but the content girl always tell me that is what I'm supposed to do, so I keep
Yeah.
doing. So our privacy policies, the reason why, now I'm going to back up and say, I actually still kind of agree with your old self. I do think like you can just strap and start. I don't really think you have to have all the legal stuff figured out. And I'm probably going to get axed for that one or whatever, but I think it's something that you don't have to have perfect. You can fix it. Can there be problems that happen? I think that's always a possibility. It's going to be the exception. At the end of the day, don't let legal stop you from pursuing your dreams or you're worrying about like the tax stuff, just take a step to figure it out, whether that's listening to a 10-minute podcast or reading one blog a day or something like, or a week, just figuring it out slowly but surely, you're doing 90% better than, well, you're doing better than 90% of the other entrepreneurs out there. Okay. And so I think that with policies in particular, why it's so impactful for online business owners is that it's basically the only legal policy that is required by law for you to have on your website or displayed if you are collecting personally identifiable information. And that could be email addresses, it could be payment information, or anything like that. You have to have a privacy policy. You have to tell them how you're storing their data, what you're doing with it. Can you sell it, share it, give it away? What are you doing with it? What's being tracked? You have to get very detailed. That's why the templates are super helpful because it does the heavy lifting for you and they're really easy for people to use. And not only that, so you put it on your website, you stick it in the footer and hyperlink it on its own individual subpage. Put a cookies pop up on your site if you're targeting customers like in the UK or European Union. It's really important to have your cookies pop up as well. But beyond that, like beyond the legal stuff, because the fines can get really pricey if you don't have a privacy policy, it really goes a long way to showing your professionalism as a business owner, I think, and just looking
I
like you have
agree.
your stuff together.
Mm.
But and it goes a long way to building consumer trust, right? Because I feel more secure buying from somebody when they have clear like refund policies, when they have clear, yeah, privacy policies. I know, let me be honest, I do not go there and read everybody's privacy policy. I will if I'm buying like something from a sketchy shop, I'll like double check to make sure they're not just like mining my data. But I think that I will go and read the refund policies, return policies, and things like that. So to have your legal stuff in order, it just really builds consumer confidence in your brand and is actually more likely to get customer to hand over their money to you in the first place. I think it just is very helpful, like for
Yeah.
business owners. And that's one of the reasons I love talking about it is because it's not one of those, oh, what do you do if you receive a cease and desist in the mail? What do you do if like, somebody's copying your brand? I think those are very sticky, can be very downer topics. I talk about them. Don't get me wrong. I talk about them. But I think that the whole legal policies on your site and having a terms of purchase in place too, which can help you like prevent chargebacks or at least win them if somebody does a chargeback. It just goes a long way to protecting your brand, but also making it more professional. It's one of the reasons I also like trademark and brand protection in general is that it can help you build and protect this like asset that you're building.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that as well. But I have a question, and this is something that when I first started consuming your conversation around privacy policy, that did occur to me, which is so Stripe has a privacy policy and whatever your email service provider has a privacy policy. And when you go to, let's say, create a form with your email service provider and you select what you want the form to include and whatever, they include a link to the privacy policy. Is that enough that like they have one, or you also, how important is it that you also have one? Because technically the email service provider is also collecting their information and so
Right.
are you. So like in my head, I feel like it needs to be separate, but I don't know. You're the lawyer.
Yeah, it should. It should be separate because their privacy policy, their terms of service, it's only protecting them, right? They can't write a policy for your business that they didn't even know existed at the time they wrote their policy.
Mm-hmm.
So that does nothing to protect you. And the legal requirement for your business to have its own legal policy for privacy policy, but also your terms of purchase, which, for example, that's not legally required. It just really protects you as a business owner. Those policies are something that are built to protect you and obviously your customer, but it doesn't involve that Calendly, for example, or Stripe or your email service provider. This is really just for your benefit. And so, yeah, I would say absolutely you should have one that is totally separate from theirs.
So let's come back to the trademark and copyright conversation. So, first and foremost, can you explain the difference? Because I hear people mix up those terms or use them interchangeably. And I know that they're not interchangeable, they have their own meanings, but I'd love to hear from you. What is copyright? What is trademark? What is the difference?
Yeah. It's funny. If you are an experienced business owner and you still mix them up, like I have clients who have seven-figure businesses who've worked with me for as long as I've been in business for myself, and they still mix them up. So
Hmm.
it's not a sign of your intelligence or your success. Copyright protects your content, the things that you create, like your freebies, your social media videos and things. Copyright attaches to it as soon as it's published in a tangible medium. So that could be like me creating a resource in Canva or Adobe or something. Once I have this thing, the copyright is already there. I own it. Registering your copyright can go a long way to showing your legal rights publicly, and then you have some additional legal protections there, but your copyright is automatic. Trademark rights in the US apply to and in other jurisdictions, but specifically in the US, because that's where I'm licensed. They apply to your brand name, your logo. They apply to like brand identifiers. So that can cover slogans, taglines, those kinds of things. They can even cover like colors, sounds, and scents. And so you can think of the Hermes orange or UPS brown. Is it orange or brown? Shoot, I don't remember. But that kind of stuff. It can identify the source. So that's a brand identifier as a trademark, whereas copyright is for content or the thing that you produce. And in the US, trademark rights are also common law. As soon as you start using it, assuming you're not infringing on somebody else, you start gaining rights to it. The way to formalize those rights, protect them, and make them like nationwide strong is to register your trademark,
Okay.
which is an important legal step. And that's a piece that I think can be tricky. Some lawyers will come on and say you absolutely have to trademark everything you do when you um before you launch it. I think at minimum you should do a trademark search, a clearance search, which is like making sure that there's not a conflicting mark out there so you don't accidentally infringe on somebody.
Right.
But trademarking is something I feel like is really important. And if you can swing it financially and it makes sense for the offer or for the
Mm.
thing that you're launching, then do it. It's one of those things that is very like asset building in your business. So I personally love it.
Yeah, I feel kind of addicted to it. It's sort of become an addiction to me in the same way collecting domains has become an addiction, although domains are a lot more affordable than collecting trademarks for things,
Way more affordable.
but I and a lot less time intensive. But it's funny because that's actually how I first got introduced to you was through a workshop you co-hosted with somebody about naming
Oh yeah.
naming your stuff.
Maybe
So if
now. Yeah.
anything, and I talk about this so much in my business with naming your podcast, but from naming your podcast, naming your actual company, naming your offers, whatever it is that you're naming, right? We have to come up with names for all kinds of things, which is like one of my, to be quite honest, one of my least favorite kind of creative things in business is naming stuff. It feels like so much pressure to me. But in helping people with naming their podcasts, that is something. So there's a couple steps we always recommend. Like, obviously, check to see if there are other podcasts by the same name in your favorite podcast apps. That's like step one. Step two, Google that name or phrase and the term podcast and see what comes up. Frankly, just Googling that phrase or name in general to see what comes up is not a bad idea. And then checking the database for trademarks to see is it trademarked, because you just, even if it's not trademarked as a podcast, if somebody else is using it, you don't really want to make that your whole personality and your whole brand. It's already in use. So yeah, you look
Yeah,
like
trademarks can coexist in different classes, like and peacefully and legally, I think most importantly. Like you can think of Dove chocolate and Dove soap. Those coexist. They're the same brand name, but they're very different things, right? Chocolate and soap. No normal consumer is going to get those two confused, like not the average reasonable consumer.
that's
They'll
such a
be
good
very
example.
distinct,
Yeah.
right? And I think that with that understanding, now there could be confusion if it was like Dove chocolate and Dove milk. So they're both food, right? Maybe chocolate is different than milk, but they're both like consumable goods. I think that's a little different, right? And so I think that could be too close. So when you're looking for a brand name that conflicts with yours, if you have a podcast that talks about business and you have a coach coaching program with the same name,
Mhm.
those are a
Mhm.
little close in terms of what the thing is itself at the heart of it, right?
Right.
Like business related. That doesn't mean it's an absolute bar. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try and get the registration, but it means
Right.
it could be a problem. And so it's
Think
just those are
also
the kinds
just
of like
for
things to
brand
check.
confusion, right?
Mhm.
Because if somebody searches for your thing, you want them to find your thing. If
Yeah.
somebody is, they just guess your domain or they mistype your domain. Let's say I was so lucky with Big Brave Business. I don't know how the heck that wasn't taken, but it didn't exist in the podcast world. BigBraveBusiness.com existed. Big Brave Business social media handles existed everywhere, and there was no trademark for it. That's insane to me because I feel like it's a great name personally.
Yeah.
But so we were very stoked when we found that when we came up with it. We were like, wait, it's available everywhere. Wow, I can't even get my legal birth name anywhere, but Big Brave Business exists, and it
That's
doesn't cost $1,000 to get the
mhm.
domain. That's insane. All of that to say, I totally lost my train. Oh, when if there was something else out there that was called Big Brave Business, well, that's a pretty specific, like it's about business, but if that did exist, but it did like a podcast would still be okay. There's also something to be said for I want bigbravebusiness.com. I want that to be me. I worked for a nonprofit in college called Running Start, and it was about helping more women get involved in politics. Now,
Mhm.
runningstart.org already existed, and it was a running club. Like physically
Yeah.
running. So even though they were totally different, so both of them could continue to operate peaceably with those two different names. They're both nonprofits. They were doing distinctly separate things, but continuously people got running. We had the organization I worked for was runningstartonline.org. Continuously, people would put in runningstart.org and be like, I can't find your website continuously.
Mhm.
So I think there's still something to be said for using that to search, even if it exists like Dove chocolate versus
Yeah.
like body wash. If you're
Yeah.
searching for the soap, then you have to specify I'm looking for Dove soap, right? And I think if we can make it clearer, then that's more helpful.
No, that's
But
a great point. Love
regardless,
that. No, I think it's a really like common sense, like practical application of the whole legal concept. That's just good business, so to speak.
oh,
I think it's a great
thanks.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested though. You said you start to gain some rights the more that you're using it. So let's say I have Big Brave Business, the podcast. I have Big Brave Business on social media. I have bigbravebusiness.com originally and the YouTube channel. Originally, we were only using the podcast. Then we were doing the podcast and Instagram a little. Then we added YouTube. Now I
Mhm.
have bigbravebusiness.com. So like I hadn't now I have filed for the trademark. It's pending, but I had not filed for a trademark, but continuing to grow kind of that footprint, there is still, I think what you were saying is there is still a level of you're building that brand identity and that
Yeah,
momentum.
you're building like your usage of it. Trademark rights, when we're using them before we've registered, they're they're restricted to our actual use. So if I'm only doing podcasts, but I want to move into coaching, I don't have any rights to coaching because I'm not doing coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And what if I am a local restaurant and I'm like, I don't know, tacos are us, bad name, but tacos are us.
It probably
And
exists.
I'm a local taco food truck, but I want to franchise it nationwide. I only have trademark rights to where I'm at currently. I don't have nationwide rights because one, I haven't done it yet, and your common law rights are attached to how you're actually using it. As you expand geographically and as you do things with a wider reach, then you start gaining more rights, so to speak. But if you were to register it federally, then you have protection nationwide and you can move into that franchise space, right? So it goes a long way to protecting your growth, your scalability, building your asset of your business, and like you were saying before, having people recognize that phrase as associated with your business, right? So I think that's just like probably the most powerful part about it is attaching the phrase or the saying to your business, to what you do personally. I think that's like
Yeah.
the most powerful part.
Well, and kind of like you said about having privacy policy and terms gives
Mhm.
your business not just the protection, but also a certain level of professionalism. It
Mhm.
makes you look like you have your shit
Totally.
together. The same is kind of true for having a registered trademark. First of all, just putting the TM looks good, but having the R, like
Yeah,
putting the R beside it, it's, oh no, this is legit.
I
Like,
know.
this is a real thing.
Yeah, it is legit too. And if you are, especially if you're in a B2B, like business in general, business to business, I think we recognize that more as like an investment in their business. So they take you
Mhm.
more seriously. So it becomes really important for B2B. When you're B2C, I think it's important and it can be important for lots of different reasons. That is probably not the number one reason, though. It's they don't necessarily care about it in the same way that a business to business would. So it can really, if you're in that particular online space, it can really help your brand way more than you think. Just like with overall growth, perception, and professionalism, it's such a huge component. I don't think that's talked about enough, or it's not, as big of an issue as it should, but it can really help.
Yeah, interesting. So I heard you mention earlier that you don't really want your content to be all doomsday and like fear mongery. And I really appreciate that. And maybe that's part of why I like following you so much. Because I say all the time on here, don't follow people who make you feel like shit, right? Follow the people who make you feel empowered and lit up and inspired.
Yeah.
And you have found your people and you found a sense of community. And you're not going to find that among people who make you feel terrified and horrible and shame and guilt and all of that. You again, you look like you have thoughts, so I'm gonna give you a chance to respond to that.
You said that. I've been following a coach for a while that I was like thinking about joining their coaching program. I had sworn off coaches because I got screwed by
Yep.
on a different
We
podcast.
all have those stories.
But I was thinking about it. And then after I sat with her content for a bit, I'm like, I don't think I like this. I don't like the vibe. I don't like constantly problem awareness. Like, I get you're
Yeah.
agitating my problem, but I don't really like it because it doesn't make me feel good about myself. And I
Mhm.
don't need somebody to sit there and tell me what I'm doing right. No, I already know what I'm doing right. I want to know how I can improve it, but I don't like the way your messaging is, right? So I think
Yeah.
messaging is really, really important for, especially with like online entrepreneurs in general, which is like what I do. I think reaching those people is just, it's all a matter of, I don't know, the content people, marketing people are, you're using messaging wrong. I don't really care. It's how you say something that is really important to get the concept across. So I created the Legal Zine this year. I just launched it. Our first issue
Yeah,
came out in October.
congratulations.
It's like my brainchild. And what I did in that is we're focusing on like one specific legal thing each month for online entrepreneurs to be able to take this concept and do the thing. Because we'll scroll all day. We'll save 1,000 posts. We'll bookmark a blog. We'll never come back to it. We won't actually implement it, but we'll think we know enough, but we don't do it. So the goal of this magazine is to help you do one thing a month to actually like improve your legal protection or improve the foundation of your business. And what I did with it is I was thinking about how can I help the most people as possible in a way that's fun. And we made it so that it appeals to like multiple learning styles, whether you're like so it's built like an old school magazine, but whether you just have time to go through one quiz that month, you're still going to walk away with something actually doable, actionable, implementable, if that's the word, into your business. And if you have time to do the whole thing, great. You're going to have so much knowledge, so many resources, templates, and all this stuff. But it's really comes down to reaching online entrepreneurs, really comes down to talking in a way that appeals to multiple learning styles. And I think using those same concepts and like kind of reworking them in 100 different ways is how you do it because it reinforces the concept. It like can cross the bridge between the hard to understand stuff and the people needing it fast and easy to do. And there's nothing wrong with that because the world moves very fast. There's absolutely
Yeah.
nothing. I think it should be easy to do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the premise behind my brand.
I love that. Okay, so in the spirit of that, in the next, let's say 6 months to a year, what are three actionable things that somebody listening who's, and I think probably most people listening are trying to grow a business, but starting or growing, because even if they're growing, we don't know what they've already done so
Mhm.
far. Totally fair. Like you said, we can figure it out later. That's okay. So, what are three things in the next 6 months to a year that we could make actionable goals, each of us?
Yeah, so I say number one is auditing your contracts. One, if you don't have contracts in place, like it every single touch point of your business, go snag a template and implement it. So auditing your contracts means looking at reading through the contract once. Most people don't do that. I'm not saying it's like wrong. I'm just saying we're moving fast in business and we don't usually sit through and go through the whole thing. Read through it, make sure you understand it, make sure it actually covers for what you need. If you've had any kind of refund requests this year, if you sell something, if you've had any kind of client disputes, make sure that what happened is covered in your contract. That's like what an audit is, making sure it works for you. So auditing your contracts. And then number two would be like, if you already have a trademark, go look at what your registration says. And do you plan to expand? Does the registration still serve you? And if you do want to expand or add to it, it'd be a great idea to go in and file for a trademark application because it takes so long, right?
And the
So you
prices are
are,
going up, right?
yeah, so the filing fees are going up from $250 for the standard for the T's Plus application, it up to $350 for the application. Currently, there's filing fees range from 250 to 350, but now in November, well, I guess what time this episode airs, it will be 300 and beyond per class. So that is what it's by $100. So it's increasing. It's not a terrible amount, but it's still increasing
Yeah,
a
yeah,
significant
yeah.
amount, especially if you file like in multiple classes.
Mhm.
So I would say file your trademark application. And then last but not least, make sure you're having regular meetings with any contractors in your business. So this little to-do list is clearly for the people who are trying to grow, who've
Sure,
already been established. It's different than what I would tell a new business owner.
sure.
But if you are working with contractors, make sure you're meeting with them regularly to talk about goals, vision, voice. Some of the worst problems I've had in business have been because of the people I've worked with. And I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm saying probably my fault for not vetting the relationship better and not managing it better. And I think improving our relationship skills within our business. So the contractors we work with are, or the employees we may have, but mostly contractors in this space is really probably the best thing we can do to move the needle in terms of scalability of our business when the people you are working with are aligned with your business's goals
Mhm.
and values. And so I would say implementing some sort of team meeting, whether it's once a month, once a week, something to like actually help you grow in a brand centered way.
Okay. I love that. And then I also related to kind of your style of doing things rather than like mongering and talking about maybe like the scary things that could happen if or like horror stories or things. What about do you have any like success stories you could share of hey, this was a huge legal win and we're so excited and celebrating this?
No, no, I'm kidding.
We don't do that.
Yes. No, all the time. That's like every time we get a I know we don't do that here, but every time I get a like trademark registration for somebody, it's normally like the biggest win ever. It's such a good feeling for the clients. And I do a decent amount of negotiation for my clients whose content has been stolen or their trademark has been infringed. So anytime we're able to settle those in a way that is, whether it's a compromise or there's some kind of like benefit to the client, I think that is a huge win. But those are really stressful processes in general, like back and forth, no matter what side you're on, is like a stressor. Like even if you were the person being copied, you're still going to be stressed out. It depends on your personality, I suppose, but like most of my clients have had some level of stress. Like, not that I'm not doing everything I can for them, but because it affects them just in general, being in that situation. I don't think that's a win. And that's why I think legal is hard to say it's a win because it is like kind of is you call it inherently negative? It feels inherently negative to me. I don't know. That's actually the reason I kind of glossed over this. But when I went from suing people and like personal injury to business, I still do personal injury. I still love it. I like helping people who've been injured and all that stuff. But I really felt like this, I don't know, I don't necessarily believe in karma as people will blow it up to be, but I do think that there is that energy exchange between for me for leveling the scales. And that's why I like to help brands start on the solid base that they need, an ethical foot forward, because you're less likely to run into those negative legal problems down the road if you have your legal ducks in a row now. I mean, I see that time and time again, like people who totally ignore trademarks and they or excel at marketing. By the time your business reaches seven figures, you're going to have somebody knocking on your door saying, hey, you're infringing on my trademark. You have to rebrand and you have to pay me $300,000. So if you're able to secure that stuff on the front end, it is just so incredibly impactful in the way that insurance is impactful for your car. As if you're running down the road and you get T-bone, you want to be able to like have something to fall back on so it doesn't stress you the hell out. And I view legal in the same way as that. So I guess it's easy for me to say legal can just be like inherently negative because I see a lot of the negative, but I do think when we take those like proactive building steps, those as small as they are, those are huge wins for your business.
Yeah. Very interesting. I've seen a couple of posts on threads where people are sharing either, oh, I just found out this is happening, like somebody copied me, or actually what I enjoy, and this is what made me think about asking you about wins, is when people are tagging their lawyer and they're thanking them because they're like, oh my gosh, this chargeback
Yeah.
situation was terrible, or this, I received this cease and desist and it was terrible, or whatever. And this lawyer helped me get through it. And I think
Yeah.
that much like the law feels like it could be inherently negative as a industry. I
Mhm.
also feel, and we talked about this with an HR consultant as well, I think it's kind of similar, like this kind of stereotype of lawyers is also inherently negative. Like we think of having to deal with lawyers as this big negative thing.
Mhm.
So I really like when we get to see the stories of people celebrating, I'm so thankful for my lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, those are, I totally agree. I love seeing those, like even for my quote unquote competitors or my colleagues. Like I just love
Yeah.
seeing that because it really does help the profession in general, especially with business law. Business law is a lot different than, I mean, every area of the law is like very different than each other, like criminal defense and personal injury and business and trademark. It's they're their own little, it's really cool to see people, yes, thanking their lawyers, whether it's like thanking their personal injury lawyer for getting them a big check or,
Heck
thanking their
yeah.
business lawyer for helping them through the 20-month trademark process. It can be either of those, and I think all of those are wins. I think for me personally though, for me, seeing a client avoid a legal problem and just take steps before problems have happened, that's the biggest win because it means you're like helping yourself proactively, and I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. Okay, on the last happy note, I like to end all of these conversations with the same kind of question. It can be work related, but it doesn't have to be. And that is, what is something that is making you happy right now?
Okay. Well, what's making me happy? We just moved to Idaho, northern Idaho, and it was a huge change for me. I've lived in Georgia for 20 years, but I
That's
absolutely love it
far.
here. Yeah, I love it here. It's really cool. It's like totally different than I thought it would be. Like I thought I was walking into,
Potatoes.
yes, potatoes,
That's what I think of.
like weird inland Northwesterner redneck kind of people. And yes, there's some of those people here, but it's more of like a melting pot and it's like actually really beautiful. And I love it. I love the nature. We're like doing so much. I feel like it's almost like a permanent vacation, which I
Yeah.
didn't expect, but I love.
That's so cool to hear. And I was going to ask you about that when we first got on this call. Like the last time I really had a chance to chat with you, you were getting ready to move.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to say, like, how's it going? So I'm so glad to hear that. Also, ironically, so we've been talking about where we're going to move because Arizona is like becoming very quickly and rapidly a climate crisis, which is not my happy thing. But we've been talking about, like, so when we're done here, my kids are now all over 20, which is awesome. I mean, it's also sad and terrifying, but it's amazing because now we get to enter this like conversation of what does our next chapter look like,
Mhm.
and do we want to stay in Arizona where energy and water is very quickly becoming like a serious crisis, right? Not that you can escape global warming, it's the whole globe, that's kind of the point, but we've been talking about Montana, Wyoming, and my stepdaughter actually said, well, we're interested in Idaho, and I was like, what? So we started
Yeah.
looking there too, and especially northern Idaho, so maybe you'll have a neighbor soon.
Yes.
But
This will be my first ever real winter, so we'll see. I'll
mhm.
report back.
Yeah, maybe I'll check in with you in a couple
Hence
months.
the hoodie. It's like
Yes.
40 degrees outside. But yeah, so they're like forecasting a super strong winter. We'll see. I don't know. I don't buy it. I think that's something they say to keep like outsiders out, but
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll touch base about it. Okay, let's see. What is my making me happy right now? Last night, so on Mondays, my kids come over, which is actually crazy. Like, this is one reason why it's insane for us to think about leaving Arizona, because right now all three of our kids are here.
Yeah.
And although they're all over 20, every Monday they come over and have family dinner with us, which is wonderful. And I can't believe they want to do it every week. They want to hang out with us every week. I don't know how we got this lucky, but I'm glad. Well, I do. I think we're good parents, but I'm really
Take
grateful for
credit.
it.
Yeah. I
And
wish my kids were there. My kids are all
yeah,
young, but yeah.
yeah. So you get them every night, just Mondays. You'd probably maybe be okay with a Monday off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's
My
funny
daughter
how it
pissed
like
me off
swings the
today.
other way. They came over last night, and one of our favorite things to do as a family is we play games. We play Jackbox, we play board games. And by the way, I make fun of, so my kids are my stepkids, but I make fun of my husband all the time. So I'm like, whose idea was it to have three kids? And you have more, but three's a lot. It's a lot. It's too many. I mean, I love them all, so I wouldn't trade any of them, but like, why did you have so many? And what I will say about having three kids, and now they're old enough that they have partners that come into their lives and into our home as well. And we have a built-in game night crew. I mean, like, I never have to try to come up with people to play games with because we've got a built-in. So that is one thing I will say. That's great
Yeah.
about it. We were playing board games last night, and we tend to play the same couple over and over and over. And last night we were like, we've got this whole shelf of games that we've either never played or barely played. So we put them on a list and we like rolled a like multi-sided die to see which game we were going to play. And we did this actually a couple times. We played some games that we haven't played in ages, like Scattergories and Rummy Cube and like some really like random things. And it was so fun. And I just, especially as we're having conversations about moving thousands of miles away, hundreds of
Yeah.
miles away, I'm just like living it up. Although we actually are really hoping we can bring as many of the three as will come with us to whatever part of the country we move to. Like, hey, you should also consider coming. So we'll see how that ends up panning out. But we're enjoying it while we can, and just soaking up the memories. And I know their lives are going to change rapidly from here, right?
Mhm.
Being 20 plus, and one is married, and they're gonna have their own families. And
Yeah.
so while we have this chapter, just really living it up, and that's really bringing me a lot of joy. So
That's beautiful. I love
yeah,
that for
thank
you.
you.
That's so
Thank you
sweet.
so much for your time. I always enjoy talking to you, learning from you. I just want to reiterate how thankful I am for finding the boutique lawyer and your resources. And that's why I'm just like a huge advocate for it. I am an affiliate for it, although I don't know that I've necessarily done a good job remembering to share my actual affiliate link ever,
I
but
the lawyer over here, I was like, oh, totally forgot. But now you've done a good job disclosing it. It's
I
like,
do have an
like
affiliate
sales pitch.
relationship with you. Yes. And
Yeah.
I've learned from you that I
Yeah.
need to disclose that. Anytime that I share my affiliate link for the boutique lawyer, I will be sure to have that note in there. And if there is no note there, it's probably not my affiliate link. It's probably just your regular link because I forgot that I'm an affiliate for a moment, which happens. Anyways, but I'm just such a huge advocate. I have used contract templates or downloadable contract things or whatever from other sources before I found you. And honestly, like, yours are different. They are easier, they are better, they are clearer, they are so easy to use in different contexts, and they're built for people who are doing online business. And I think that that really makes them different inherently, because you're not trying to make something work that was built for something different and you're like, well, how do I adapt this to what I do? It actually makes just so much sense. So I cannot stress this enough, how much I did not bring you on here because I'm an affiliate. Honestly, I brought you on here because I became an affiliate because I genuinely am so grateful that I found your resource, and I will share it with everyone. So thank you for that.
Thank
And thank
you.
you for your time. And of
Yay.
course, if you want to connect with Amber with your own legal advice, to get your own legal advice, to get her support or help with personal injury or with things like trademarks and things like that, like, her information is going to be linked for sure. And make sure you go follow her on social media, bare minimum.
Thank you so much for having me.